So I think like as long as you have an identity and as long as there's a culture that you can either participate in or create, then you can kind of do anything. I think I think that's really the key for like any of the stuff that I'm doing. And I think that's why I have grown so intentional about like slimming down how I describe myself. Um, just saying that I'm a creative person working at the intersection of a handful of things. Because I think like if I can have an identity and I can move culture, then I can be successful.
Welcome to New Forms. I'm Sander Fractures, and my guest today is Black Dave, a music artist at the intersection of anime, streetwear, and sneaker culture. When I was going back through your stuff, I've seen you use and heard you use the term slash generation, which I love, right? Like, what is that? Like, how do you describe yourself?
You know, the way that I generally describe myself is I just say like if I'm doing like a panel or something or just introducing myself in general, I always say I'm a creative person working at the intersection of anime, rap music, streetwear, and sneaker culture. And that's kind of where I leave it. Because I feel like what happens is people will know me for one realm of creativity, but they won't know me for the others. And so instead of me saying that I'm a musician or I'm a designer or I'm a photographer or I'm a whatever, I just say I'm a creative person working at this intersection. The slash generation thing, someone actually said to me on a podcast, and it's common. I think it's always been common for people who like make music that we are doing many, many things at once, but it wasn't always common to give it a name. And I don't think it was common for us to accept that either. And so, like, I, right now, I just finished up an album and I'm doing all the marketing stuff. You've talked about this a lot yourself, but like, all that stuff is just me doing it myself. The picture I used for the long form piece is a picture I took of myself. The cover I made myself, the music I made myself. Um, and it's just like my website I made myself. You know, the 45-day documentation of my album I did myself. I edited the video myself. The slash generation is just people who are, you know, creative director. Because I think creative director is like the best term for it, even though creative direction doesn't, even though like you're not always doing full creative direction. I feel like what most of us are doing is a form of creative direction, and I always feel like the best creative directors can at least somewhat do everyone's job in the creative process.
Do you think that's like symptomatic of like where we display work, right? Like you talked about like the different things that we do being in separate audiences or in separate worlds, like people don't know we're doing different things. How much of that do you see as being like part of how we share what ourselves with the world?
I think in the social media generation especially, yes. I think on top of that, like when we had chronological timelines, it was easier for us to show all of ourselves. But now that we live in an algorithmic timeline world on every social network, what ends up happening is if someone specifically interacts with my music content, they're only fed my music content. If someone only interacts with my design content or if they only interact with yards, they're only fed that. And so the algorithm actually puts us into these boxes, which is its job. And if you are a creator creating in one specific realm, it is helpful. But I think when you are creating across multiple things, I was just on the phone with one of my friends and we were talking about how our time in Web3 only covers our last 5 years as creators. And before that, I was printing t-shirts. I made this t-shirt. I was DJing. I was throwing parties, throwing shows, designing websites, recording music, making beats for people, like, you know, just all sorts of things. And people only know me for what they know me for in Web3. As far as like a lot of my current audience goes, I always think it's interesting how um like you see people in Web3 and the only people you see them hanging out with are other Web3 people. And you're like, wait, who were your friends before this? And and I feel like a lot of us are really caught up in that and we're like defined by the people that we've met and like our latest our latest like I guess universe that we operate in.
Why? I was gonna say like why does like that social media medium end up being so like narrow? Like when I hear you say that, like sometimes I'm like, yeah, but that like it feels unnatural for someone like me or you, maybe even more you, to be like, you know, today here's what I did, right? I took these photos. Here's my photography work. Today I built this thing. Today I coded this stuff. Today, like I get to experience that in your chat group, right? Like what we're consuming and what we're being inspired by. But like we don't naturally do that in like a social media format, right? It's not our like it's not like our combinator, right? Like we're combining these art forms in other places, right? Like maybe like NFTs or like platform building or world building in terms of like releases. But is that just like it's just not natural to us, or is that just because in my head, like back in the day, right? Like I can imagine someone being a photographer, like being quite normal for an art student or an artist to be like, yeah, I'm a photographer, I'm a painter, I'm a sculptor. Like like I can kind of like maybe I'm just that's my idea of what it was like, but that feels like not unnatural to me, right? But now, like yeah, like I don't know, it could be algorithms, it could be streaming. Maybe sometimes I think it's because we're musicians and we have this like idea in our head of like audio and the infrastructure above that from like legacy industry. Like we are pigeonholed, the industry is pigeonholed. I don't know where I'm going with this, but like, do you, why for you does like those other things stay separate, and why particularly is like social media like not the medium where you combine as much of those things?
I think you have to be like a certain age maybe to understand this specific take, which you are thankfully a certain age. Um, blogs, we come from blogs.
Sure.
Blogs don't exist in constraint. When I was on Tumblr, you clicked the button, it said text, audio, video, like, all these different options, quote, whatever. And you could you could present yourself in a variety of ways in that place. Once Tumblr especially died off, we moved completely away from that. We moved completely away from the idea that a medium could be for everything. And we moved into Instagram and it was like, take pictures here. And then got to YouTube and it was like, take videos here. Got to Twitter, it was like, write words here. And when you make music, the thing about music is like, music is supposed to be the ground that everything is built on top of. But there's nowhere that music can be the ground of anymore. And as far as like a platform goes, and I'm not like this isn't an anti-platform take. It's more of a we had a platform for this and now we don't take. Um, I would be able to have a blog or even have a Tumblr. I consider Tumblr and blogs separately, but you were able to have one upload a bunch of music to it, and then everything you posted aside from the music was like to support the music, but we don't have that anymore. And because if I'm posting on Instagram, a song has to have a visual. If I'm posting on Twitter, a song has to have an explanation. If I'm posting on YouTube, a song has to have a music video. And there are all these rules that came with all these platforms that really just didn't exist. I mean, they've always existed, but they didn't exist, before 2010. It was just like I'm gonna go on Blogspot, I'm gonna go on Tumblr, I'm gonna go on Blogger, I'm gonna go on whatever you Live Journal, whatever you were using, um, and we really moved away from that, and we're like in the singular platform, singular use era, and that's what I'm really, I guess, critiquing about social media.
It's like a weird gravitational pull, right? Like I feel like sometimes it's all for audiences as well, right? That there is like an interest in other things, and including us wanting to do multiple things, but there is this like constant pull of separation and categorization, right? And I think the oversaturation probably leads to that, right? And, if you're a consumer, like the algorithmic push is to feed you the thing that you think you want, right? And not feed you sporadic different things. So you end up in lanes, or at least you end up with this world where like even in Substack, I write a lot of bit about different things, but you still see those kind of takes where it's like tips to write to create a successful Substack have like a key core theme, right? Like, like have, and wherever we go, we're kind of pushed into like boxes, or like compartmentalizing the different things. I think that's interesting when you say that about Tumblr being like a platform for mood, right? Like in sense of like rather than medium,
Yeah,
um, which
is
I
this the
hadn't thought
part
of really
where we
before.
bring back gatekeeping? Is this like
Mm.
where you say it wasn't gatekeeping per se. It was that we understood how saturated everything was, and that we needed someone or something to uh, sort of distill the good things and feed them to us. Like I was a hype beast reader for a long time before I even got into sneakers, before I bought my first piece of streetwear, before I went to New York City for the first time, like before I went to LA, like and like if those things didn't exist, would I even have been able to find the good streetwear brands or been able to find the good rap music or been able to find the good whatever? And I think like we live in a time now where um, we're trying to exist in this space where we're democratizing the ability to make things and the ability to be in front of people, but the algorithm isn't doing this like extremely hard curation, and it's trying to like convince us that we chose the things as opposed to saying like we scoured the earth and found the best whatever. And so sometimes I wonder like if we should be thinking a lot more about like curating things for personalities, curating things for broad taste. Like I'm a big Virgil Abloh guy, and so like people don't Virgil does a lot of things, and people understand Virgil, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, that seems like something Virgil would do." There's like I think my favorite compliment as a creator is when I do something and they tell me it feels like the other medium. When I can when I can make a song and they say, "Yeah, this feels like something you would do," and then I could show them a shirt design. And like, yeah, this looks like something you would do. And I like the looks like something you would do much more than I
Mm.
do a specific critique on an aspect of a work. I think that we're all creating um, personalities or like identities or whatever. And I don't want to use the word brands because I feel like that's too like financially driven, but I think we're all creating identities with our work. And if our work, no matter the genre, can look like our identity, I think that's a successful multi hyphenate creator.
So you always have like quite a strong sense of your identity, right? And like maybe like you say that comes with more time to develop that and feel confident in that. But you've gone through so many different like technological experiments, phases, stages. I guess like how do you approach like keeping that kind of cultural center even though you're constantly like pushing like how you take that out into the world?
The key for me is at the beginning, I said I created the intersection of anime, streetwear, rap music, and sneaker culture. So, like, if I'm doing that, it doesn't matter where it's at. And so I think, you know, I started out playing in bands, like, and I think my second band, we had t-shirts, but like some kid designed them. Not some kid, he's actually like one of my friends, but this kid designed them. And I did like a contest on MySpace. This was like 2006. And people submitted t-shirt designs. And my band was called Robo Reptar at the time, like from Rugrats. And um, kid designed a shirt. We used the design, and that was like my first time really having experience. And I started like getting the streetwear like maybe like 2004, 2005. So like the idea of me doing my own shirt was so cool. But like even back then, it was like I had songs about Pokemon battles back then, like and it was like it's always just been that. It's always been anime, streetwear, not rap music back then, and sneakers. But like it's and then like I think moving from there to like the blog era and like me getting into photography, starting my own streetwear brand, like being in a more like rappy hardcore band. We called it new metal, but it was like kind of a rappy hardcore band, and like getting into DJing, starting to make beats, like all this stuff. Like it was always that. And so like as I progressed through technology, the base was always the same. anime, streetwear, rap music, sneaker culture, and rock music. But I don't I don't like I'm not deep enough into like being a fan of it to like say it and like feel respectful about it. So I don't like to say it.
Whenever part of this process is like me trying to decode like what you're doing, what we're doing, what other people are doing, and like I kept like throwing around like comments like, you know, the genre is people experimenting, partly just as like a conversation starter that annoyed a couple of people that I was friends with because they were like, nah, you know, like I make R&B, right? Like, and that person makes this. Like, I'm an R&B artist, and I was like, no, no, your genre, your audience, people that are interested in artists that are doing different shit, right? Which is partly true, partly not. But the question that people often ask, like, if you're a producer, or if you're like on Song Exploder or something, the question is like, what's your process, right? And like, the answer to that in that world is like, oh, you know, like I get up, you know, like something comes to me, I start with like a melody idea, and then like I track that melody idea. And we probably do those things too, right? But what I was trying to think when you're talking is like, what is the version of that for someone who, you know, like what is the version of that to ask someone like you? What's the version of that to ask, you know, like a Virgil Abloh? Like what like, when you say like what is your creative process? In my head, I'm like, what is your kind of like routine? Like in terms of like looking for inspiration, consuming, creating, like what do your days look like in when you're kind of like in a maybe when you're in an exciting like spiral of like feeling like you're onto something that you're excited about.
So like I just finished an album, like I said earlier. Um I was watching anime one day and I heard something and I was like, oh, I need to download this soundtrack right now. You know, that's kind of where I am. I think there's a lot of stuff too that sometimes I remember like experiences and I want to think a lot about those experiences. So like for instance, when you would go somewhere, I think fashion on the internet has changed a lot. But once upon a time, you would wear clothes and it would say something about you. These days, it's not so much that. But I feel like these days, when you wear clothes, it tells us what side of the internet you're on. But like once upon a time, if I wore a t-shirt of a skate company, I skated, you know? Like it's it's the pretentious guy saying like, oh, you like Slipknot? Name five Slipknot songs. You used to not have to do that. You knew that the person in the Slipknot shirt knew five Slipknot songs. And I feel like in a lot of ways, like that is what like authenticity is to me the most. And so like a lot of times I'm just having experiences and then I'm thinking about like if there's like a technology that I can replicate an experience with, whether that's like well, I remember this thing, or oh, I really like this is a Thrasher t-shirt essentially, but it says Charleston, which is where I live, and so like I had a whole brand that was just like me taking other brands and putting Charleston instead, and it was very like oh, this is what streetwear is, um, and but I was just doing this, but I would sell them at rap shows that I would throw, and I would DJ all the shows, and I made a living like that for years. Like that was just what I did. Um, and that kind of thing is what I'm interested in is like, what are the cool cultural things that I like that either don't exist or I want to be a part of? And and then I just find a way to be a part of them. So like I make anime rap because I feel like for a long time there weren't rap artists who really included anime in their music. There are now, but so I was like I want to make rap that includes anime and I always did. I want to throw rap shows because I live in a city with no rap shows. I want to DJ because no one knows how to DJ. I want to start a clothing brand because I love streetwear. Like, and I think for me, it's I have to like experience a little bit of the world in terms of like I don't think I need to have like emotional experiences. I just need to have experiences around things that I'm interested. I think I'm like far more of like a product person than I am like an emotional person. Like, I want to make things that are cool. I want to make things. I mean, I want the things to make you feel things, but I want to make things that I feel like are cool and things that like feel like they could be on a blog or feel like they could be on like a mood board or like a vision board or whatever. Um, I'm more into that than I am like trying to make something that's like, oh, this reminds me of how I felt when blank. I'm not good at that.
Where are you at in terms of like the kind, I guess, like the mediums that allow you to do that best? I know that we met through sort of experimenting around NFTs, which like gave like I remember you doing the verse token and some other things that were like I guess it gave us like a space to be like, I've got an idea and no one's done that idea. I'm going to try that idea right now. There are people that are like 20 years older than me that will argue that that was always the way, right? You could go out and start a night, you could go and start a conversation, release music in a different way. But mediums do change, right? We couldn't do mixtapes until we had tapes, and we couldn't do and CDs and ways to like physically distribute music ourselves, and obviously that is constantly changing. Um, are there like new things with where do you feel like you're at a place now where there's some things happening that feel exciting for you to kind of combine some of this stuff that excites you, or do you feel like you're in there's a pause now? Like where are you at in terms of like what tools are around you enabling you to do, I guess?
I think the issue is we have to like make a living at the same time, you know?
Hmm.
Like it's not it's not so much that there aren't interesting things around us. It's that will people care that I'm using an interesting thing? Um, I mean, the last couple of years being someone who's been making NFTs has not been easy for anyone making NFTs, and especially music NFTs. And but I think that there are still so many interesting uses and use cases, even around like coins. I remember I had made like a meme coin, and then I was like, let's make an NFT project that uses the meme coin as the currency to buy it. And it was just like, let's try to do a physical product that uses the coin to buy it. Let's like with the physical product, let's make a physical product that then like has a way for you to claim an NFT by owning the physical product. Like and like these like sort of experiences. I'm I feel like the second word in my head is always like a more business word. Like I said experiences and then I was like, oh, or flywheel, like and I feel like these experiences are really the thing. Even like now it's like using like AI and stuff is cool to me, but I think it's still a little bit early broadly in music to like use AI a lot. I've been using it for years, but that stuff is cool to me. I wish that I could get it to work more the way I wanted. Um, AI is only as good as your prompts, but I am having a bunch of fun thinking about how to connect things. And I think for me, it's because I came up playing a lot of video games. And I think technology right now just looks like video games. I came up playing like MMORPGs and stuff, and so it's like buy items, sell items with the in-game currency. And crypto is the in-game currency of the internet. And then every piece of the internet has its own micro in-game currency, you know? And and so that's how NFTs always made sense to me. I was like, oh yeah, like ETH, it's the in-game currency of the internet, and every NFT is the product that you buy with the in-game currency. And then what you could do with NFTs was just like you can program these like a thing in a video game and they do things. And through that, I was like always able to do stuff. So I think like it's just like it's really just a mix of my interests. Um, and I've just been able to find ways to make all of it make sense together. I don't know if there are any tools that are helping me right now. I think the main thing I'm focused on is like how do I tell the story I'm trying to tell? How do I like present the identity that matters to me? Like, I think what ends up happening is like my identity as a creator is very broad and very big. Maybe it's not broad, maybe it's just big. Like, it's not like it's a whole bunch of things. I've been naming the same five things the whole time, but it's very big. And sometimes, like, it takes you a long time to see everything that's there. And so, like, how do I continue to communicate my identity in ways that make the most sense? And so, like, that's all I'm trying to use the tools for. I think, like, obviously, I want to be interesting, and maybe that's just like my natural position is like to think of new ways. But I think there are people who like their whole position is just like, what is a thing that worked and how can I just build one step higher than that? And I think some creators are like, I want a whole new thing, and some creators like, I just want to step one step higher, like, built on the shoulder of a giant already.
You just finished the album in 45 days. Was it 45 days in the end?
Mhm.
One of the things I loved about that process was the days that were in there was also the days that didn't work, right? It didn't allow for like this kind of like sanitized version of like creativity, which I kind of found I loved because I think there's just like not enough of that around, right? It's that kind of like um that sharing, and I think what was also is interesting about that is like it's not a new technology, but it is in a way a new medium, right? You're going to release the album at the end, and maybe that's your goal, but for me, the album, like it exists already, in an interesting way for me. Like, do you want to just maybe like where are you at with that? Like, how did you find that process?
So I started on my birthday. Um, I think like a couple of weeks leading into that, I saw this kid. I wish I could remember his name. He was building a recording studio in like 30 days or 60 days or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And then at the end of it, he recorded a band. Like the last day was him recording a band. And then he like went on some weird hiatus. So I think something happened with his family, and then but he lives on like 200 acres or something obnoxious. And so I saw that. I thought that was interesting. And at the same time, I was considering how I have built this really strong foundation online in crypto and NFTs specifically, and how I don't have any real audience outside of that. And so I was like, well, maybe social media can help me. So let me try this 45-day thing, because even watching that guy specifically I'm talking about, I think he may have started with a few thousand followers and ended with like 200,000 or something. I don't know if he gets a lot of recording bookings or whatever, because for him, the music was never presented. I never knew how good at recording he was, but I was interested in recording with him because he was telling cool stories and like his identity matched mine and all. And so with this, I was trying to like do both, where I would post every day, hopefully get some new followers, but I was also updating the music playlist at the same time. And so if you were riding with me, I would say, "Oh, I made two beats today. You can go listen to them now." "Oh, I started like writing lyrics. Go listen to those now." Like, "Oh, I started doing this. Go listen to that now." And and so I try to do this thing where like if you were there at the time, you have your own story, but if you can go back and watch and then listen to the album at the end, because the album's done now. Um and and still have like an experience. I think on this is one of those social media things, right? Where you're trying to fit your like round peg into a square hole, which I know a round peg will fit in a square hole if it's just the same dimensions, but like let's say square peg in a round hole. And like that doing like a daily thing and saying, "Hey, I make music." Like, "Hi, I'm Dave, I make music." Um, oh, here's the thing you want to see, but saying like I make music at the front was like my attempt. I think um, the multi-hyphenate in me really has me attached to a lot of things, and my crypto Web3 audience is especially attached to me as a thought leader and less to me as an artist. And I just want to make sure that I'm not creating that same scenario outside of Web3, where it's like, "Oh, Dave's interesting, but like, have you heard the songs?" And that's what I'm really trying to shoot for. And that's what I was trying to shoot for with the 45-day album process.
I love that idea. I miss some of the interactivity of it, but I love that. Do you think like in today's climate that would have to become like your entire output for like the next 2 years to really like blow it? Or do you like in my head it's like, it takes so long to get the message across that you might want to do it again, or is your thing like that was my thing, I've done my thing, I'm gonna look for my new thing?
I fear that I might have to do it again, because even I remember talking to someone, I might have been like 30 days in, and he was like, "So what are you gonna do when you're done? Like, you gonna do a 45-day countdown?" And I was like, "Am I just gonna be the 45-day guy?" Like, I don't want to be the 45-day guy where like every 45 days something else is happening. I want to be the guy who makes an album, did it in 45 days. You follow that journey. You love the album, and now you can't wait for me to tour. Now you
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
wait to buy the album. Now you can't do this. You know, like that's what I want it to be. But I think anyone who spends their time on the internet and tells people how to use the internet will tell you that if it's working, keep going. There are people who say that the first year is the beta test. You know, the first 100 videos are actually to build your confidence. It's not even for them. And if that's the case, Jesus Christ, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be the 45-day guy. And so I think, I head out of town for 2 weeks and a few days, and I normally don't head out of town. I normally just sit here all day long and I work on stuff. But I feel like when I get back, I'm going to try to figure out if there are versions of that that can exist for me as a creator. I just really worry that this format, the 45-day format, is like the equivalent of being a one hit wonder. And if I'm not making something in this format, no one cares about it. And so, how do we make sure that we aren't defined by the way that people discover us? Um, because I think people don't spend long enough with anything to um, to allow the definition to expand. And is making something in 45 days the thing that people go, oh, it took me 20 days to figure out your personality, but now that I'm here, this makes sense. Oh, it took me 60 days to figure out your personality. It took me 100 days to figure out your personality. But does this mean that I have to make another album in 45 days? Do I have to like go through my 45-day marketing process? Do I have to go through like my 45 days leading up to my album release show?
Hmm.
45 days doing this, 45 days doing that? And if that's the case, when can I release the shackles of a 45-day process? I'm worried. I don't know the answer. I'm just right now concerned, and I'm going to think about it when I get back from going out of
It's
town
just
taking a
it's
break.
like I feel like displaying and organizing and categorizing is such a big part of the problem, right? Because in my head, you know, like it would make a lot of sense to go to a Black Dave place, whatever this place is, right, online. And it'd be like seasons or collections, right? That there is like a series of projects and each one lasts a certain amount of time and experiments with a different thing. And those things that are the root of what you talk about are at the heart of that, right? And but there isn't really like a great place for that. But if you go to a designer or an architect, right, they will have like a series of projects that you can explore, and that kind of output for an architect is like really, for some reason I've been looking into like architect studios, but you know they will work on a project that is designed, you know, like the inspiration for it was nature, and they like look into like cell structure and transpose some of those like things into the design, and the next one is in a different place, right? So the materials are different and they use different materials that are inspired, you know, like there's a story behind each project that makes sense, right? And it's like the architect or the head of the the studio's identity and its interpretation of the materials, the space and the uses build a story, right? And when I was looking at these sites, I was like, you know, for someone doing different works, like I guess websites aren't a place that people go to check out like musicians, right? Like really, like they used to be. And the place that people go to consume is structured in a way that suits the platform, not in a way that is free to like manipulate. Um, and there's like I find for me personally, there's quite like a tension in that because like I guess like you, I want to tell the story of these different projects, but I also want that freedom of being like, yeah, I'm moving on from that project, right? Like I want people to see the thread, and I want people to want to dig to go and find them and be excited for the next project. But I don't feel like I want every project to be exactly the same, right? Yeah, I want to make music the same way every time, right? So it's kind of like there is like a tension there. But I still just want to sit on my studio and make music the same way I've always made it.
I think like you know who really has like the benefit of this is pop stars. Pop stars are allowed eras, and they are allowed to be a completely different artist perceptually than they are than they were the last album. Um, right now we're looking at the latest Doja Cat album, and she's like an 80s pop star. Last album, she was like a rapper, like really focused on like how people perceived her from like a religious standpoint, and if she like was a devil worshiper or not. And then before that, it was like bubblegum pop, and before that, it was like I'm in space and like all this stuff, and like being able to make music and curate a sound and curate your visuals around that is something that I feel like is always afforded to artists of larger scale. And when we try to do it, we have to try to figure out a way to make it make sense that doesn't break our already existing scaffolding. And in some ways, I wonder if we should break our scaffolding every time. I love when artists I like delete their whole Instagram. It's like, oh, it's
Yeah.
time for you to do something else. But at the same time, for me, with my 6,000 followers on Instagram, if I delete everything, where will they go? What will they think happened to me? I
Mm.
feel like we end up in a space of worry because our scales aren't large enough. Um, and oftentimes we are, I don't know if it's like a form of fear, like insecurity or what, but we will not try things because like an artist of our size doesn't do that. Like only an artist as big as blank will do that. I wonder if there is something that we can do. I think a lot about this, like on the thought leader tip, like especially in Web3, I would get lots of offers to use things for the first time, like early on. And I would say, hey, I actually only have two fans. Like, is that cool? And they're like, oh yeah, we just want to see how you like it. I'm like, but you won't be able to see how I like it because only two people are gonna get it. Like, like I'm not a good source. Like I'm not a good thing to use for this. But at the same time, is that attitude the problem? Like, is my attitude of saying only two people are going to use this the problem? Or should I be saying, oh, yeah, I got two people who are definitely going to use this, like with
Yeah.
an excited face?
Mm.
Um, is that the solution to the problem? Like, am I suddenly, if I change how I think about my five fans, then does everyone else think about my five fans differently? Instead of me saying, oh, only five people are going to come to my show, it's like, yo, I got five people who are definitely showing up. Like, five people are going to come. It's going to be sick. The five of them are going to go crazy. Like, whatever, like, however it goes. And I think that this is why I was talking about Tumblr and blogs and stuff before. It's because, like, it allowed us to present not completely in a way that we wanted, but we lived in a far more customizable internet back then. If you think about the kids customizing their own MySpace pages, I don't recall ever doing that myself, but everyone else in the world apparently did. Um, but like, I think I was too cool to like learn how to code, even though I knew how to code. Like, I was too cool to do it. But I was in coding classes in school, but I just refused to do it. And like, I wonder if the internet, especially in the social media era, because we wanted it to be so democratized, where everyone can, um, we ruin the customizability of it. And because the internet is no longer customizable, we are no longer able to express ourselves as much as we want. And it's like, if you want everyone to be able to do or use something, you have to make it more basic. And I think
Mm.
that's how we ended up here.
It's always like just the amount of people, the amount of audiences all trying to be pushed through the same ch funnels just make it so hard, right? Like the time you have to create for yourself to become a person, like for someone to be like, oh yeah, that guy who, I love that person because I love these things, but he's always doing something new, right? They're always doing something new. In the world that we're operating in could take years, right? Like can take 2 3 years. Not just because finding audiences are hard anyway, but to even like complete and fulfill a series of projects over time is hard, right? But it's quite normal for like traditional artists, sculptors, artists that work in different mediums. Sometimes they might work in metal, they might work in clay, they might work with like it's very normal for someone to build their career and it become their career like full time and maybe get reputation in their 60s, right? Like in art, in art cultures, maybe not in like the mainstream kind of like super cool, lane, that there was always going to be one of those looking for the next hot thing. But it's quite, like normal for someone to really peak in their career at 60 plus in like art worlds. And as you're saying that, that's kind of what I'm thinking, right? Because it takes time, right? Like you might be painting with different materials, or you might be, maybe that's maybe there's anti-progress in that world too, right? There's probably some guy doing graffiti stuff in the same style every week, blowing up as well. But I don't know, like in music, there is definitely like the age narrative is definitely like pushed harder. And I think that makes us put pressure on ourselves to sort of like, like fall into those specific lanes quicker and get known quicker, right? And therefore you end up wanting to be known for the same thing. And I'm kind of in like a 4-year cycle now of doing my artist project, and there's so many of the people that were there at the beginning that cycle's ending for them, in that like, why am I doing this still? Like if they haven't gone to this like level where it completely blows in the way they imagined it, um, I can see that cycle ending, like the questioning of like, why am I doing this? Like, can I just do this again? The same kind of music, the same genre, the same sound. And the fork is often like, why do I have to make the same genre? I can do anything, right? Like, why does everyone care about genre so much? Um, or it's often like falling out of the industry, or just caring less and less and less and less and less until, like there's a reason to feel like it's not worth it for me anymore. And I think like there is a creative longevity in like trying different new things. This is what I'm thinking as I'm talking to you. I think it's actually like interesting and healthy, right? Like if the career goal is to be doing it for a long period of time, then that's not just about making money. It's about like your personal like energy to want to do it, right? Do you feel like how do you feel like about that with where you're at now? Like how do you feel like you can sustain yourself through like um your desire to do the thing, or like do you also feel like there's going to be a time where you're like what like I don't know, money, life, like whatever the other things are, we all consist of things outside of just creating. Like how do you see that panning out for yourself, or like how would you like it to pan out for yourself?
The themes, I think, especially around this current project and like this current phase of my life, is really locked in on like my age and like the idea of success as a rapper at this age. I think making rap music, we are not we're not upset that rappers are older if a rapper achieved success when they were younger. But there are no examples of rappers achieving success once they're older. I think like in the art world, you can see that. You can see an artist's career take off in their later years. You always see like those posts that are like, I don't know why I can't think of any of them right now, but it's like so and so wrote their first book at 43, and it's like some
Yeah,
huge
yeah, yeah.
author.
Writers
Um,
definitely, yeah, yeah.
yeah, or like a fashion designer or like a painter or a sculptor or whatever. But you never, and you have never, and don't get me wrong, rap is only like 50 years old, but you don't see any stories of like this rapper's breakout album happened at 42. That doesn't exist. And so I'm 38. I just turned 38. The gray hairs are coming in. I'm starting to feel old in various ways. And a lot of like really going for quote unquote it as an artist really involves you just like going in all in on it. And at what point do I start a family? At what point do I try to buy a house? At what point do I like try to do all these things as opposed to like trying to go all in on being an artist? I have a girlfriend of almost 6 years now. Like, one day she's gonna be like, hey, like we should probably like make some money and decide to live a life that isn't you chasing this dream. Um, and so like I definitely live in this space where I feel like I can do whatever I want for as long as I want, but there are certain checkpoints, I guess, on the timer that you feel like you pass, like I think I always make the joke that like someone who raps and is 40 and is not successful is just a guy who raps. Like, oh yeah, my uncle, he raps. Like if you give him a few beers, he'll rap. Like I don't want
Mm.
to be that. Like
Yeah, yeah.
and I feel like like it's the same in rock, right? Like if like I have friends whose dads are just like they're in cover bands and they play originals sometimes, and it's like oh yeah, this guy just like loves playing music. I don't
Hmm.
know. I love music. I love making music, but I think if I give up on chasing the career of music, I might stop making music. Not because I hate music and not because I feel like I would associate making music with failure. I think I would just, at the moment that I accept that music isn't the thing, I'm going to look for another thing that
Hmm.
might be quote unquote age appropriate, even though I think that so much of what I do and who I am is based around this idea that you can be in your late 30s and love anime. You can be in your late 30s and rap. You can be in your late 30s and DJ. You can be in your late 30s and do all these things. But I think the part of it that brings it all together for me is you want to be able to do all these things and be successful. And if you look at like Tyler the Creator, his whole mission is like do whatever you want, be whoever you want to the max. Like who cares? Like if you like something, lean into it. He has done that and is successful at it, and that's the reason the message resonates. The
Mm.
message doesn't resonate when you're unsuccessful.
Yeah,
And
sure.
if I'm trying to tell that story and I'm not successful, quote unquote, by whatever standards, then I'm actually failing at putting out my message. And I'm better off trying to find a new thing to put that message out because I'm only based around four or five things anyway. So just look for a new way to say that same thing. And so for me with music especially, I feel like I'm on a timer a little bit. And I'm just excited to go as hard as I can for as long as I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
until the
I feel
judgment,
you.
I guess, overtakes me.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you. I mean, I guess I'm ahead of you, literally, in years. But yeah, I've been through that, right? Like, and I'm probably still going through that. I would say that, like, probably more than I've realized, most people my age still want to make music and make music, right? Like, I think, like, for our parents' generation, that was different, right? Like, we are of an age where there's way more a percentage of the people our age that still create and still make and still want to do things. So I think there's some differences. I also think of it like in terms of skill sets, right? You know, like there is like a body, what's the right language? There is like a body of knowledge, a body of work that is like can only be like developed through like the practice of doing the thing, right? Like there is no other way to get like there's no other way to be you, right? Like there's no other way for someone to get to be where you are now as you without having done music and photography and trainers and anime and like all those things. And I still think there's like a powerful value in that you know like sometimes I feel like I've been too wrapped up in music, right? Like I was not going to stop music. I'm going to keep making music, but like what is the you know like I've started using the word constellation because I quite like it. It's kind of dreamy. But like, what is like the constellation of things that should be a part of? Um, that also gives I guess like I'm looking to like make more of those things that um bring the where the music, the work and practice of the music making and culture brings value into those places, right? So like it adds value to that music thing, right? Like obviously there's still like ego parts of it of being like older than everyone else around me that's doing it, right? Like I'm in electronic music chat groups and you know like people just don't realize, right? Like they say stuff to me and I'm like, oh shit, do I need to tell this guy that like yeah, I do know that band because I went to see them like 20 times when I was like, that age. Or I was out raving to these people. Um but yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I'm going through that journey, but I feel like a little bit of ahead of it. And I do think it's worth like opening up to like where can all this knowledge bring value, right? And for me it's like it's been like younger people, right? Like it's been like creative projects and community and teaching and working with other people who I think like more than ever now, like the experiences of people like us are just so valuable, right? Because how to create meaningful connection and experiences, value, how to experiment, how to play, how to learn to play again with mediums and like and making blogs and all that stuff, right? Is becoming relevant again as the noise just gets so unbearable. Um, that people just aren't having the same kind of like formative creative freedoms and experiences that basically a lack of technology gave us, right? And like as those technologies came in we became adaptable and we were like moving through these cycles. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I can imagine a world where, in the same way that a Virgil Abloh was still designing clothes, that someone like us is still making music, right? But I also think that like developing the constellation of things around that is important, but not necessarily a negative, right? Like, I don't know what they are for every person. I think they're individual, but um, it's something I'm really interested in, obviously, right? Like, and I think that these conversations are important and interesting because there's, it's quite, everyone's story is so unique that is like, that's what I think is, I'm hoping, the people I've tried to line up to speak to is like, there's something in that. There's something in like mobilizing that uniqueness, um, that I think is really interesting that we've done for our own creative outputs. But I think, like in the wider world, that has a lot of value. Um, I don't know. Yeah, I can imagine easily someone with your skill set being a creative director or, multiple things like that. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what happens next.
This is why I obsess over identity and culture. Because I think like as long as you have an identity and as long as there's a culture that you can either participate in or create, then you can kind of do anything. I think I think that's really the key for like any of the stuff that I'm doing. And I think that's why I have grown so intentional about like slimming down how I describe myself, just saying that I'm a creative person working at the intersection of a handful of things. Because I think like if I can have an identity and I can move culture, then I can be successful. And I don't know if the medium matters as much. I think like while I may lament like aging as a rapper, it's not that I dislike rap music suddenly. It's more that the conditions that exist for me doesn't align with the identity or my current conditions won't allow for me to move culture. And that's really the thing, right? How can I find different ways to move culture and how can I find different ways to present my identity as I grow older? And like I think a lot about like I know like I agree with you on like teaching the youth and helping out and stuff and but there's also that like those who can do, those who can't teach kind of
Yeah,
thing that
that is a
exists.
thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the thing. Of course.
And
Yeah, yeah. It's a big thing. Yeah, yeah.
but I think we can still do. I think we just have decided not to do anymore, and
Hmm.
that doing has become really hard. Doing is more like climbing a mountain than walking down a road now. And we have decided that a mountain is too hard to climb to do anymore. And so we teach. But we have done, like I now know how to climb mountains, so let me teach you how to climb mountains. And that is important. But should we instead be thinking, I'm going to climb this mountain and then I'm going to learn how to go into space. Like, are we giving up, quote unquote, too soon to teach? Even though teaching is fundamental, because if I can teach someone how to climb a mountain, then they can go to space 15 years before I learn how to climb a mountain, and then they can learn how to do the next thing. And so,
I
like,
think teaching can be running a collective. Teaching can be starting a label, right? Like teaching can be starting a brand, right? It's about bringing people around, like putting that creative knowledge and power and direction and mobilizing it through more than just like a single identity. And I also think the doing is different, right? The doing used to be very cyclical, right? Like the doing, what you're talking about doing is like way more forward thinking and ambitious than most things that a lot of younger people are doing, right? Which is like you're constantly trying new stuff. You're not just doing the same thing, right? That we have that a lot here as well, especially in like music teaching, which is like music teachers are always failed musicians, right? Which is changing because a lot of the people are creating great music and vibe coding and doing different things, right? Maybe they're not going viral on social media, but maybe they are, right? And maybe that they're just doing that on YouTube and not teaching, but they're still producing that kind of content. So I do think the landscape is shifting, but I still think it's like a big messy storm at the moment, and maybe like we're not coming out the other side of that. But again, there is very successful YouTube channels of people who are ex-teachers, right? Like who are now just quit teaching to go and run their music education YouTube channel, right? And like it's going backwards the other way. And I, like I know other people who are teaching who have had like an ambient project blow up and not blow up, but create some waves in a niche scene, and they've got the opportunity to compose for a TV show and then a film, and they've gone back to kind of like they found their way back into doing that because while they were teaching or doing another job, they had enough money to pay for a studio, right? Like, or buy some equipment or buy the time, like have a little bit of money to invest in their work. So I do think like it's a big messy storm out there, for want of a better way of putting it. But I think like there's some reconfiguring of things happening, and maybe like our generation is at the beginning of like what that means for people of our generation. And my generation is probably like above older than your generation, right? I also think you're right about that. The nuances of like being black and making rap music and being in America and different, like there is a lot of differences happening, right? Like I'm seeing in the UK, there's been like some very successful pop acts that the narrative has been like, oh, this person used to be a writer or they were dropped. And now like there's a artist called Self Esteem who's amazing, right? And there's lots of male rock bands that have managed to, once they've been successful, carry on. But there are also some starting to do well, like later on. But I think, yeah, you're right in that there's a lot of nuance to like what is happening and what is possible. I don't know. Maybe there's something different coming.
I, I think so. I think we're in the middle, or we're at like the peak of what democratization looks like. Like we're at the peak of like what everyone being able to do this looks like. I remember being a kid and thinking that like every person on the radio was a professional signed to a label. Like I remember being like, yeah, like if you're on the radio, like you're obviously a big artist. Like you're probably gonna be on MTV already. Da, da, da. Like, and then getting older and like hearing music that I've made on the radio and being like, oh, you don't have to be famous. You don't have like people just play in bands for fun. Like you don't only do this as a job. And like I think we're in the maximum of that. And the funnel is too wide and we're having a needle in a haystack moment. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how we can pull back a little bit, but we have demonized and villainized curation and gatekeeping over the last few years. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to start seeing like really high curation places start to exist. And I think it's going to be not only just curation, but curation with like this sense of like ownership over that curation, whether that's a label or what. Um, like more smaller labels that find these really specific niches of artists and take them as far as they can. I think we're going to start seeing more like crews and collectives and things like that. Maybe like less formal than a label,
Hmm.
but more like I like you, I like you, I like you, I like you. Like let's just do stuff. Like let's just support each other. And I feel like we're going to enter like this curatorial state that we may not have seen before. I don't know what it looks like. I thought that um, DAOs and crypto were going to be a version of that, where like we could like curate but not as villains. I think right now, like we cure anytime we curate or gatekeep, we're villains, and I think we're gonna get back to like it not being villainous, but it being more honorable to do that. I think even if we look at something like Letterboxd and how like there are people on Letterboxd who like reviews you trust more than anyone else's reviews. It's like that person. Imagine that person starting a film company. Imagine that person starting a film club. Imagine that person like opening a film studio or like a production house or whatever. And I think like we're gonna find more ways to get back to that. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I feel good about it.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that feels like a nice note to end on. I'd like to see that, man. I think I hope that that is the case. And I'm seeing like a lot of evidence of that too. Like even just space being curated, like people doing like monthly meetups, weekly meetups, and building like, like a place to share knowledge. And maybe that's an extension of like what has been like the kind of dark forest chat groups that have been the last few years that I felt have been quite definitive in my experience of the last few years of what being a creator is. But I would like to see like more of that being done in the real world, or maybe some of that experience being taken out into like the community around me a bit more, or my kind of like music community, because they haven't been a part of that and they've been quite disconnected. Um, so yeah, that sounds like a interesting way to look at what comes next. Yeah, I hope it's the same. And I feel like I've been keeping you here for a long time, so I'm trying to wrap it. But that was a good point to end on. Um, what I will do is like try and record. I guess I should end it by saying thank you very much for giving me your time, man. I love talking to you.
I love
It's
talking to
always really
you.
interesting.
It really is. I
I'm
think
really
you,
excited to see like what comes next from you, man. Like I think like in the UK, there's definitely like a wave of like respect and excitement around people that are not under 20, right? Like over, like there is a movement of like drum and bass DJs, writers, people who used to run, like pirate radio stations, writers, people who used to run record shops, like where they're like, their time is having a different, like sense of value again now, whether that's being interviewed on like TikTok channels, whether that's speaking at conferences, whether that's like curating events, whether that's like offering like input on like how councils are dealing with like nightlife, like, and or how brands are curating like spaces for creatives. There's definitely like a different feeling of things happening. So like, yeah, I'm excited to see what happens next. Okay.